Hi, it's Summer, and this is my October and November wrap up. I'm just gonna go in chronological order. So the first book that I read in October was The Spare Room by Andrea Bartz. I gave this one 4 stars. This one is like a sexy thriller that's set during the pandemic. The main character is kind of at rock bottom, and her, I think it was her fiance, are taking a break. They're not really sure if they're gonna stay together. Since all of this is going on, she gets invited by a friend to go and quarantine with her and her husband at their house. And while she's there, she kind of gets wrapped up in their marriage. For this one, I said this was so twisty and sexy, I didn't know who to trust, and it kept me guessing. My only complaint is that I felt like the sex scenes couldn't decide what they wanted to be as far as how explicit or detailed they were. I wish they would have made it less fade to black. I like spice and smut in my books, so when a book is advertised to me as being a married couple invites a third person into their bed, I kind of want like sex scenes and stuff. And I didn't really feel like we got that. Just a lot of fade to black scenes, and I just found it really annoying. I'm like, if this is what you're gonna be, commit to it. But overall, it was a really fun time. I really enjoyed it. After that, I read The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I gave this one 3.5 stars. The audiobook pronounced the main character's name as Mika, so that's how I'm gonna pronounce it. I don't know if it's right. But the main character in this book is Mika. She's a witch, and she's very isolated in this story and this world. It's dangerous for witches to gather in larger groups because it can attract more attention to them. So there's like a rule among witches that you're not supposed to like associate with other witches because it's dangerous. But one day she gets invited to come and live at Nowhere House and teach 3 younger witches how to use their magic. I loved the magic vibes, I loved the found family, and there's a grumpy librarian, so it's Grumpy Sunshine, and I always like that trope. I really loved the setting and atmosphere of Nowhere House and the quirky people that lived there. On Goodreads, I said that the way the conflict was resolved was really cool. To be honest, I barely remember how this book ended. I barely remember what the main conflict was. And that's kind of my main thing about this book, is that it's a little bit forgettable. And I also just had really high expectations for this book because I love witchy books. I love Grumpy Sunshine. Like, this is cozy fantasy, and that's like my genre. It was really cute, but it's not a new all-time favorite. After that, I picked up Garlic and the Witch by Brie Paulson. This is the sequel to Garlic and the Vampire. I honestly didn't have very high hopes going into this one. I knew that it was going to be really cute and have beautiful illustrations, but I just kind of didn't really think there was a whole lot that another book could do. Like, I just kind of thought it was going to be another Garlic and the Vampire book. But somehow there was like so much character development in this book, and there was a really cute adventure that Garlic goes on that's really different from the first adventure in Garlic and the Vampire. So this one surprised me, and I gave it 5 stars. I just felt like you really got to know the characters even more. You get to learn a lot more about like the magic and stuff that's in this world. The main message in the first book was like being brave and conquering your fears, and even if you have anxiety, you can still do things. In this book, it also focuses on like, you know, having anxiety about things, but the main thing is dealing with change. And I just thought it was really sweet. Next up, I have another cozy fantasy. This is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayer. I actually read this twice in October. I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I'm just gonna read the back of this. It says, with ailing family to support, Evie Sage's employment status isn't just important, it's vital. So when a mishap with her town's most infamous villain results in a job offer, naturally, she says yes. So this literally follows her being the assistant to the villain, and she's also kind of like developing a crush on him. So she works at his manor house with a bunch of his other like employees, like all of these people like doing his dirty work and stuff, and it'll have scenes of her like at her desk doing like paperwork and stuff, and then you just hear like the screams of someone being tortured from his office. It's so quirky and ridiculous and funny, but there's also like cute moments between the two of them, and there's like a lot of backstory and character development that you get to see. I saw someone on Goodreads write a review calling this idiots to lovers, and I totally agree with that. I also didn't see the main twist coming until right before it happened, so that was really nice to be surprised. There's also a frog named Kingsley who understands English, and he communicates with people through holding up signs, and he was a really fun little like side character to have in the book. I really loved this, and we also just barely got news about the second book in the series, and also that it's going to be a TV show, so I'm very excited about all of that. Next, I read House of Roots and Ruin, which is the sequel to House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. I gave this one 4.5 stars, but I rounded it up to 5 on Goodreads. Now looking back, I think I would give it closer to a 4 star. This one is following one of the sisters from the first book, but I think it's 7 years in the future after the events of the first book. She's an aspiring artist and she gets an opportunity to go and draw a portrait of someone. So she's traveling for the first time and she's gonna be staying at their house with them. She starts developing feelings for this guy, and there's also some really weird things going on around the house. This series is like fantasy horror, so there's a lot of like creepy elements to it, and this one specifically has like plant horror in it. On Goodreads, I said I couldn't put this down, and I think I liked it even more than the first book. Fantasy horror is definitely a new favorite genre of mine because of this series. The only thing that bugged me about this one was how a lot of things were so obvious and it took Verity forever to figure it out. That ending though, so good. I do remember really liking the ending. And I do also still think that I like this one better than the first book. If the first book had kept the same vibes as the first half, in the second half I would have liked it like so much. It would have been a 5-star, but the ending of the book like ruined it for me. This book was a lot more solid like as a whole, and it was a really fun read. I definitely recommend this series if you haven't read it already. Next, I read Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. I gave this book 4 stars. This one is about the main character, Vesper, who is returning home. She left her extremely religious community when she was 18 and hasn't looked back, but she just recently got invited back for a wedding, and she's trying to figure out if it's an olive branch or a trap. So she's going to be reconnecting with family again after a long time, and also just dealing with a lot of things from her past. This book is not for everyone, and it's very polarizing, and there's an exact point in the book where you will know if this is for you or not, and you'll know when it is. It was definitely for me. I loved how unhinged this was. On Goodreads, I said this was nuts. It really went there, and I had a great time. My main complaint is that basically nothing surprised me, but it was still a crazy fun read. It's definitely not cozy horror like Rachel Harrison's other books, so be aware of that and look into trigger warnings before going into this one. After that, I read The Clackety by Laura Senf. This one's a creepy middle grade book about a girl who must rescue her aunt by entering a world of ghosts, witches, and monsters to play a game with deadly consequences. Evie lives in Blight Harbor, the 7th most haunted town in America, with her aunt Desdemona, the local paranormal expert. There's a building in this town that her aunt thinks is like really dangerous and super haunted, so she tries to go and deal with the paranormal stuff that's going on there, and she gets into some trouble, and Evie has to go and save her. She has to make a deal with the Clackety, who is terrifying, and she goes on this adventure to save her aunt. I gave this one 4 stars, and I said, OMG, this was so good. Such a creative and unique book with the best vibes. An animated bird tattoo, keys, mysterious houses, and bargains. Evie is such a strong character, and I absolutely loved rooting for her. The adventure that she goes on is equal parts whimsical and terrifying, and I loved seeing what would happen next. After that, I read Iris Kelly Doesn't Date, which is the 3rd book in the Bright Falls series. The first book is Delilah Green Doesn't Care, the second book is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, and then this 3rd book, Iris Kelly Doesn't Date, and it follows Iris, who is part of this friendship group with the other 2 female main characters from the series. Iris is pretty much the only person out of her family and friend group that doesn't have a significant other. She doesn't believe in commitment. She only wants to do one-night stands with people. The other main character that we're following is Stevie. She's an actor, and she never does one-night stands, but she decides that she wants to. So her and Iris have a terrible one-night stand, if you can even call it that, and they think they'll never see each other again. But the play that Stevie is in for the local theater, they have open auditions, and Iris is one of the people that auditions. So they're gonna be working together on this play. Stevie has told all of her friends that the one-night stand went great. So it says, desperate to save face in front of her friends, Stevie asks Iris to play along as her girlfriend. So there's fake dating, and I always love that trope. Iris is also an illustrator and an author, so that was a really cool aspect of the book. I loved seeing all the situations that they got into. Just in case I didn't say it already, I gave this one 4 stars. For this one, I said OMG with a crying emoji. This series is an all-time favorite. I loved Iris and Stevie and seeing the rest of the gang in this one. I'm not a huge fan of Shakespeare or pretentious theater stuff, which there was quite a bit of in this one since they're doing a retelling of a Shakespeare play. But I loved the characters and the details so much that I didn't mind it. Also, this book made me blush. It's funny because I don't remember that about this book, but I guess it made me blush. The smut is somewhere approved. I really love this series so much. The second book, especially about Astrid, is my favorite. That's the one that I related to the most. All of the books have female-female romances. They have awesome queer rep in all of them, and really fun, unique characters that feel real. Like, I feel like I'm part of their friend group. And yeah, so I just love the series. It's really special to me, and I think you should pick it up. Next, I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I gave this one a 3/3.5 out of 5 stars. I'm just gonna read the synopsis for this one because I have a really hard time explaining the plot of this book. It says, celebrating her 45th birthday at her local pub, popular podcaster Alex Summers crosses paths with an unassuming woman called Josie Fair. Josie, it turns out, is also celebrating her 45th birthday. They are, in fact, birthday twins. A few days later, Alex and Josie bump into each other again, this time outside of Alex's children's school. Josie has been listening to Alex's podcast and thinks she might be an interesting subject for her series. She tells Alex that she's about to make a bunch of changes in her life, and she thinks it would be a great subject for her podcast. So they start working together and recording things, and Alex starts uncovering some really dark secrets about Josie and her past. And also, Josie is kind of like twisting her way into Alex's life. It's kind of like a toxic friendship kind of situation. I feel very unsure of how to rate this book. Even weeks later, I still don't really know how I feel about it, mainly because the subject matter is a lot in this book and it's not fun to read about. But also at the same time, I was really enjoying the story and I was hooked because the stakes were super high. I wanted to know what was happening, that I listened to the audiobook in one day. So I feel like that right away means that I really liked it. But also I didn't like it. Like, I felt icky while I was reading it. I would just say to look into trigger warnings before going into this one. I also said that I liked the writing. It reminded me a lot of Ruth Ware, and the audiobook was super well done. It was full cast and had sound effects. The stakes felt high, the pacing was great, but the ending feels a little unsatisfying. After that, I read Hooky Volume 2 by Miriam Bonastri Tour. I gave this one 3.5 stars. This one just follows the events from the first book. The first book is about 2 twin witches that miss the bus for magic school and they go on an adventure. There's also a lot of politics and stuff going on though. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I said, I love these characters and the art in this series so much. I like where the plot is going to. My main complaint is that it felt too long. The middle was really dragging for me. The ending was really good though, and I'm excited to read volume 3. I think I do better with this length of graphic novel versus this. There's so much dialogue to keep track of between all of the characters. Each character's voice bubble has a certain color, so you can try to keep track of who's saying what. But there's so many colors to keep track of and so many people to keep track of. I didn't always know who was talking or who they were talking to. And like I said, the middle just really dragged for me. I do really like where the series is going though, and I just love seeing how much the characters have grown. And then the last book that I read in October was The Little Ghost Who Was a Quilt, written by Ryle Mason and illustrated by Byron Eggenschweiler. This is a children's book, so I decided that since I'm not the target audience for this, I'm not gonna rate it, but I really enjoyed it. It was so cute and unique. The message of the story is that your differences are a good thing, and it's a good thing to be unique because everybody brings something different to the table. The illustrations are so well done. I love the color palette. This book is set during Halloween, and I actually read it on Halloween, so I thought that was fun. This was just so cute, and if you are a fan of children's books or graphic novels, I think you should read this one. Now we're moving into the books that I read in November. The first book that I read was Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I read this a few months ago when it first came out, but I wanted to reread it because of the sequel that came out in November, Iron Flame, which I also read in November, but I'll talk about that in a second. I had all the same feelings the second time around as I did the first time. I loved this. I love romantasy. I had high expectations for this book when I first read it, and I was really surprised and happy that it lived up to the hype for me. The second time around, I just felt like I was able to pay more attention to the small details and to some of the more minor characters, because I wasn't trying to figure out the magic system and the world and all of that. I love the characters and I love their dragons, and the ending of this book made me feel so many emotions. So I'm sticking with my 5-star rating. I think if I had to, I would maybe bump it down to a 4.5, but I'm just gonna stick with a 5 because I loved it. And I think I loved it even more the second time around. In between this one and Iron Flame though, I read A Fragile Enchantment by Allison Saft. I received this one as an ARC through NetGalley, and I was so excited about it. I talk more in depth about it in my Animal Crossing Decides What I Read video, so I'll put that up in the cards. This one follows the main character. I think her name is Neem. I still don't know for sure how to pronounce her name. She's a magical dressmaker that gets commissioned to make all of the outfits for the royal wedding, but she gets wrapped up in some politics that are happening, and there's also kind of a forbidden romance. I gave this one 4 stars, and I said cozy fantasy plus Bridgerton vibes with a grumpy sunshine romance. Say less. The writing was beautiful and I loved reading about the main character using her magic. This also had some queer rep in it that I wasn't expecting and I loved it, bi rep specifically. My main complaint is that this book was trying to do too many things. There's an aspect of the book that has to do with the main character's hair and I didn't feel like I fully understood what was going on with it. Also throughout the book, beings called the Fair Ones are mentioned fairly often, but they play no role in the plot. There was really no point in mentioning them. Other than that, I really enjoyed this one and I'm excited to read more from this author. After that, like I said, I read Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Since it's the sequel, I won't give a synopsis. I gave it 4 stars though, and on Goodreads I said, I really love this world and characters and this book was pretty much everything that I wanted it to be. My only complaints are that it felt a little bit too long. It was lagging quite a bit in the middle for me. There were too many names of people and places to keep track of. I know that that's a common thing in fantasy, but it was just way too much for me. And it was a little bit predictable, but the ending was crazy. I'm just really glad that I liked it, and I will definitely be continuing in the series. The last book that I read in November was Lovelight Farms by B.K. Borison. This one is about Stella and Luca, who have been best friends for close to a decade. Stella is the owner of Lovelight Farms, which is a Christmas tree farm. She's in pretty bad financial trouble right now, and she's not really sure if the farm will survive it. To try and help the farm, Stella signs up for an online social media contest where there's a cash prize and also it'll help direct a lot of people to the farm and get it more attention. On the application for the contest though, she lied and said that she runs the farm with her boyfriend, which she doesn't have. So now, while this social media influencer is coming out to see the farm and do all of the things for the contest, she has asked Luca to be her fake boyfriend. I loved all of the Christmas vibes, the found family, there's cats, and I also mainly just loved the relationship between Stella and Luca. You can really tell the depth in their relationship. They just know so much about each other, and it also actually has some pretty good smut in it too. This was actually a reread for me. I read it for the first time last year and I loved reading it again. Those are all the books that I've read in the last couple of months. If you made it to this point in the video, leave a mushroom emoji in the comments. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next one.
Appalachian sunrise.